Good morning, everybody. It's bright and early. I know you're just getting on with your day, but I wanted to pop in here for another episode of the Daily Gems podcast and just bring a word for you today. And actually, today I have another special surprise. As you know, we occasionally, once a week, maybe a few times a month, bring on a special guest. And today we have Jim Burgoon. Jim is a good friend of mine. I've known him for a couple years now. And whenever I say this individual embodies grit. Grit, Grit, you know that word. That's that's this guy to a T. Now, it's not one of those you would imagine. No, if this is no offense to you, Jim. This is not one of those you're gonna see this guy being like an Andy Frisella kind of Andy Elliott kind of person. I'm talking about this individual has internal grit more than anybody I know. What this individual has been through, what he's experienced, but not only that, what he's been able to accomplish through all of that is amazing to me. So today we're going to have a conversation about grit and how you can keep pushing forward and keep your focus even when the world is on fire, even when you feel like you're in a less than ideal situation. So Jim, welcome to the show. And in a quick 30-second nutshell, share with everybody a little bit about who you are, and we're going to get right into the combo.
Well, I appreciate being on the call with you, being on the show. My name is Jim. You can find me at Lead at Jim and on any social. And I've spent the last 2 decades learning and growing as a leadership development coach, in and out of faith-based type things. I was a pastor, I was a teacher in public school, and now I'm here to serve the community and just help them grow personally and spiritually, not only to what they're calling in life, what God gave them, but what their desires are to accomplish.
Love it. And you all know I don't bring just anybody on this show. Like there's some people actually that have reached out and I say, no, you're not a good fit. I only bring on people I truly have a connection with and people that I trust to speak to you all. And Jim, obviously you heard he has the credentials, but he has a story. And so, Jim, I want you to tell your story of grits. And there's tons of stuff you could talk about. And I know you came today prepared with some points, but prior to this show, we talked about grit, and you said that was one thing that was on your heart. So
Mhm.
share your story of determination and grit with the audience and what grit means to you.
So I think a lot of times what we think of when we think of grit, we think of just put your head down and move forward. But sometimes the fire of life, because life is going to life, and sometimes life's too hard. And it's the whole statement, when it rains, it pours. And that has been kind of where my life has lived in. For those, and if you ever listen to my podcast, my wife has diagnosed five mental illnesses. Last year was a dumpster fire of a year. I lost my mom, I lost my sister, I lost her mom, and then my wife had a suicide attempt on top of a whole lot of things. And so when you get into these places, and this is just last year and a half alone, not including probably the last 10 years, but when you get in these conversations about thinking through life, you realize that life is going to hit you, and sometimes it hits you hard. But when it hits you hard, you can't stop. Like you can't put your life on pause because life continues. So you really get this decision. Am I going to continue lifing, or am I going to stop and just let everything pass me by? And I think that's the difference between living a life of regrets versus living a life of impact, is making sure that you have a decision, that you've made the decision that says, I am not going to stop because life is hitting me hard. Now, that doesn't mean stop and not take care of yourself. That doesn't mean, just ignore the pain. That means dealing with the challenges that come at you, being flexible in them, and doing the thing that you need to do, even if you have to do less of it. So this is where flexibility comes in, because sometimes when life hits hard, you have to pull back a little bit and you can't go
Right.
as intense, but you begin to push your face forward in the wind and say, I'm just going to take that next step. And that's really what grit is saying, I am committed to taking the next step in this journey, no matter what the journey throws at me.
I love it. And so because you mentioned something about, slowing down, being flexible. And so is that different for everybody? I'm assuming it is. And for you, in these times of strong headwind, right? In these times of big obstacles, how was it in your life that you were flexible, and how would you recommend other people decide what to let go of, what to pick up, what to slack off of, what to be flexible with? So in your life, but then also what would you recommend for other people?
So yes, it's going to be different for a lot of people, but there are things that we can say are very similar in principle, such as if we're really honest, we live as entrepreneurs and leaders, we live to the expectations of a lot of people. And when you're having life hit you, you really got to reevaluate those expectations. So if you're like you and I, we're hard chargers, we want to do 16 things that today alone,
Right?
and you've got to give yourself a reevaluation of those expectations and say, okay, I'm feeling a certain sort of way. So this is number one. You've got to embrace your feelings. You've got to acknowledge you actually have feelings. And you're going to sit there and you're going to have these expectations and these things. You're going to have to reevaluate them and say, in light of what I'm feeling, in light of what's heavy on me right now, what can I realistically accomplish? Not what do I desire to accomplish, not what do I want to accomplish. What can I realistically accomplish? And then you've got to learn to rest in that. Because I think, as driving entrepreneurs and leaders, we think we can do 5, 10, 15 things, and we're like, man, and then we're upset if we don't complete it. We think we didn't have a good day. But when you have all those extra feels and all those extra things happening to you, a good day could be the fact that you just finished the one, or maybe even half of the one. And then you
Right.
take the rest of the day to navigate those feelings and feel the feels and do the self-care that you need to do. Because here's where my challenge is: if you don't do that, you end up in a whole lot more burnout, and you end up in a worse place than if you would do that.
Mm, love it, man. You'll end up in a worse place. Oh, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely somewhere you don't want to be, right? Especially if you're already experiencing some sort of pain or you're in an emotional state, you don't want to go further into that. So, Jim, this is amazing information, amazing, tips and tricks. So, what if somebody's been pushing through something for a long time? Like, obviously, you have experience in this. They're like, Jim, I've been resting. I've been evaluating my expectations. I've been doing everything you said. I feel like I've been doing it forever. I've been in this hamster wheel and I just don't know what to do next. I don't know. I just feel like I'm constantly getting beat. Like, is there any time when it relieves? Am I ever going to get a sigh of relief or a breath? Like, speak to those people that feel like they've been in that hamster wheel for a long time, because I feel like you're talking about grit and pushing forward in the headwind and, taking time to reevaluate. But how do you do this on a long-term scale? Is there any difference? Is there any tips and tricks, or I don't know if there's any tricks, but anything you would recommend for people that have been in that marathon for a long time?
Yeah. And being somebody who is continually and still in that marathon, I can say a couple things. Number one, it does get discouraging at times because you feel like you've been beat up so long and you don't feel like you have anything left. And there are times you wake up in the morning, you're like, man, is my life ever going to be different? The first thing I would tell you is ground yourself in your faith. As a faith-based guy, you got to ground yourself because there has to be some, for me it's Jesus, so there has to be someone bigger, something bigger that's pushing you forward, because the moment you lose hope, you give up completely and you'll lie
Mm,
down and never do another thing. So you've got to maintain that level of hope. So for me it's my faith. So every morning, every day, sometimes I forget to do it, sometimes I'm too tired, but I try to read my Bible, I pray, I have these ongoing conversations with Jesus, because I have to stay grounded in hope so that I can keep moving forward. The second thing I would say is you've got to change your relationship with your pain. Because if pain happens so often and you become cynical, you begin to have this negative outlook. So everything is trash. If I begin to reevaluate and relook and really kind of have a different perspective of my relationship with pain, my relationship with the trauma, my relationship with the struggle, I can then just make sure that I can move that next step, because now I can redefine and reframe. And I understand that this pain is not forever. but it's for now. I
Right.
understand that this challenge, what can I learn from it, not what is it doing to me. You start reframing, you start having that different relationship, and it will propel you instead of hold you back.
Dude, I feel like that last 2 minutes there was what I needed and what a lot of people need. So number one, ground yourself. So make sure you have something, a higher power, something you can look forward to. For us, Jesus Christ, ground yourself in your faith, and then coming back and change your perspective in relationship with pain. Go back and rewind that, guys. Rewind that. So Jim, I want to, because I know we try to keep these 10 to 15 minutes, and I know we're right about the 10-minute mark here. I want to go ahead and just change directions a little bit. This is a very serious conversation, I know, but you've worked with a lot of leaders, and so there's a lot of leaders in here listening as well. How do you lead someone who is dealing with a lot of trauma, dealing with a lot of pain? Because sometimes these leaders they're managing employees that have stuff going on at home. Sometimes they have volunteers, whether they're in a nonprofit, a church, or something, and they're managing volunteers. And yeah, as you know, volunteers, that's not paid, meaning, they
Right.
have the option to stay or leave as they go. How do you lead somebody through trauma? And what advice would you give for somebody who's here that they may not necessarily be going through a scenario that requires a lot of grit, but they are leading people who do?
Right. So I will say two things. Number one, know when to, refer. So you may be leading through people through trauma, through these things, but there are times where professional help is needed. Know the line. Don't cross the line. Know when to refer. That's only great wisdom. The second thing I'll tell you, which was I'm contemplating today, actually, which is so interesting, it's being present without pressure. And it's being able to be present with the people, especially in a volunteer organization, if they're feeling the way, just sitting with them. Maybe you come and cook them a meal. Maybe you come and do their lawn. Do something where you are now with them in presence without the expectation from them so that they can sit there. Because what that ultimately does is that builds influence and lets them know you actually care and they're not just a tool for to build your organization. And so it's presence without pressure. And I think, and I'll just say this, I think we've lost in this world today the ability to have a true relationship where we don't require something from someone. And
Mm,
so, as a leader, we've got to learn to know the balance between when to require and push and when to just sit.
mm. Powerful message. I hope you all take notes on that, because I think that's for some of us here that have, a few employees or even maybe a lot of employees, you could definitely take that as a leader to heart. So, Jim, I love you, brother. I love your message. I love your heart more than anything. Where can people, I know you mentioned at the beginning, but just refresh people where they can find you at, because this message may have resonated with somebody big time and they just need to maybe express that to you or connect for more information. So refresh them where they can find you at, and then leave them with one last tip this morning. Lead them with one last a word of wisdom.
Absolutely. So if you want to find me, I'm generally on most socials, Lead with Jim, at Lead with Jim. You can find me, just look that up. And you'll see my beautiful face, and we can connect. I love hearing from you guys. So if I was to leave you with one last thing of wisdom, I would say be mindful of the expectations you live up to and the expectations that you project. Because what you project could either lift or crush someone, and what you trying to live up to can do the same for you. So if you want to live at a higher level, live free, manage expectations to the point where they're realistic. So you're having a realistic set of expectations for yourself and a realistic expectations for the people you lead or even the people you love. So manage those and be careful what you project and be careful what you accept.
Love it. Thanks, man, so much for that word of wisdom. Everybody go connect with Jim, let him know how awesome he is, and go share a takeaway with him. And more importantly, there may be somebody else in your life that needs this message. And I say this in multiple episodes, but I really truly do believe there's somebody out there in your network today that may need a word of encouragement or may need that grit, right? And so share this episode with them. You never know whose life you could change just by simply copying a link and sharing it with somebody. And listen, I say this over and over again. I do not get paid for this show. I take hours out of my day and my weeks to do this. This is more of a passion project. So by sharing that link, I have no incentive in it, other than just helping people get to their next level. So, Jim, we appreciate you, man. Everybody else, have a great morning. Go crush the day. Take these words to heart, dwell on them today, and find ways that you can take this advice and use it to move your life forward. So, Jim, we will see you later. Everybody else, we will see you in the next episode. God bless you all. See you soon.